This is Bob Bakert with Jon Herington. Bob Bakert of Jazz Guitar Today with Jon Herington, and we're just kind of getting together. Jon was our Jazz Guitar Today's very first cover story.
Yeah,
And
well, the Steely
Pat
Dan thing is a
Martino.
very unusual hybrid, and it's very unique. In some ways, some of the early records sound a little of the time, but
The style of music, everybody knows what bebop is. Everybody knows what hard bop is, or most people know what that is, and what people would call fusion
mhm.
and all of that. But what do you call the style of guitar that you play? With Steely Dan, what do you? I mean, is it jazz? Is it rock? Is it?
Well, it's a tough question,
Yeah, I know.
and thankfully the labels don't make much difference to the players and probably to a lot of listeners. So it's probably a good thing. But it's an interesting question nonetheless. For me, I don't really even think of myself as a jazz guitar player, even though I spent a good period of my life devoted to studying jazz.
Mm-hmm.
I was quite young, but I sold my gold top Les Paul and my PA system, and instead bought like an archtop Johnny Smith FO guitar, to play
Right,
jazz on, and didn't bend a
right.
string for about 10 years or something like that. So uh, I think I know that music very well, but I don't really gig doing jazz. I don't do jazz gigs per
Right.
se, and haven't in
Well,
many many years. So
let me let me just say this parenthetically. The name of the magazine is Jazz Guitar Today, but really it's more improvisational modern guitar is what we're trying to address.
yes, well, that's an interesting thing. I recently saw a Bill Evans, the piano player, Bill Evans
Mhm.
video, and he was talking about his understanding of the term jazz, um, and he likened it more to he thinks of it not as as a label of style,
Mhm.
but as a label of process. And he even connected what he did as an improviser to what most composers did 100 years before him, because all of the like Bach, I mean, would have been. I would love to have been in the room when was improvising, or when Mozart sat down just after a glass of wine and just
I'll
started
sit
inventing.
I'll
I
sit
mean,
next to
I
you.
would love to have seen
Yeah.
that. And these guys were
Oh,
incredible
that's
improvisers. They have
mhm.
to have been.
Yeah.
And Bill Evans was talking about jazz as this process of that kind of music creation, like in the moment music creation. And I like that better than I like, even though, I mean, of course, it has been used, as a description of a type of music, of genres of music. And then there are subgenres, and as you said, there's hard bop, there's
Right.
fusion, there's
It goes
whatever,
on and on.
and yeah, I mean, those are all useful for certain things. Maybe they're useful for radio programmers, for people selling music, whatever. For if you're looking for a certain kind of music that you want to explore, all very useful. But thankfully, also usually pretty irrelevant to the people making the music. I think most of the time. But with the Steely Dan gig, it seems to me that even though I never play with anything that is even close to being called a jazz guitar sound in terms of the tone of most of what we think of as traditional jazz guitar sounds. On the other hand, a player in that chair in that band trying to play that music with no knowledge of jazz harmony be lost at sea. So the reason I don't use a jazz guitar sound on Steely Dan is because the records sort of set the tone for me and
Right.
set the precedent for the kind of sound that works with this music.
Right.
And above all, I'm sort of a team player. I want the whole thing to work. I don't play in Steely Dan any differently conceptually in the biggest picture sense. I don't play in Steely Dan any differently than I did in Rob's band. I tried to find what the music is asking for
Right.
first. I mean, that's always first. If there's room for some personal expression and I'm still taking care of business in the big picture team, ensemble sense, then I love that, and I go for it. But my basic primary priority is always do try to make the big picture of the music. Do what
Right.
I can to make that as great as it can be. And
Let-
and those records are just stunning. Those
Well,
they're just such great. I mean, everything about those records is so good that if you start there, you're going to be in good shape.
it's funny you say. I mean, those records are. If anything's perfect, they're perfect.
Yeah, they're just. I
They
mean,
just
they
the
got fussier and fussier about them. I like even the earlier ones, which have a little more of a live energy. Kind of Royal Scam has a real sort of kind of vital, in your face kind of almost like you're there live.
hmm
And the later records seem a little more carefully and meticulously manicured. But they're so beautiful. And
Well, yeah. If anything's perfect,
yeah, they're
from a
just.
music point of view, the recordings are. I mean,
I mean,
every
everything about it. The writing was amazing, lyrically and musically. The producing was
yeah.
amazing. The playing is amazing. I mean, they're such great producers. I mean, they
Right.
knew how to call. Not only they knew how to call the right players, but they knew how to pick the right takes from the right players as well. So I mean,
Which
in every detail. I mean, and the recording quality was always. They were always careful about that. They were concerned with that. They had like just standard, like very high musicianship value. They wanted like things in tune, in time, and they wanted character, and they wanted fun. And it's just every little part of it was executed so beautifully. That's why those records. I mean, to me, the top three have to be Asia, Gaucho, and the Nightfly. Because and they are sort of they're the sort of end of the first big sort of sequence of great record making together. That happened in a time period that was with no interruption. It was 18 years before they did another studio record, which was the first one I got to play on, Two Against Nature, and I came out in 2000. I played in 1999 on it, but that was sort of another phase, and it sort of feels like another phase because it's
right.
so much newer, and a little disconnected from the earlier work.
You're not the only one that feels those records are amazing. I mean,
Oh well,
the
no,
world
they
recognizes those
certainly do. Yeah.
records.
Unfortunately, all we
Those
can do right now is talk about it. We can't play. We
yeah, I
we
know
the
that.
second for the second year in a row, the summer tour, which
Oh,
was
geez, don't tell me.
a double bill with Stevie Winwood, has been moved.
Oh God, one
So
of
this
my.
summer is not happening. It's booked again. I mean,
Oh,
postponed again for next summer. But it'll probably happen next summer.
I
Me too.
absolutely love Steve
Still
Winwood.
sounds unbelievable. He
But
plays great. I mean, so I have to tell you that this little amp I'm playing through the Kemper
mhm.
amp. It's a profiling amplifier, they call it, the
Yeah,
Kemper.
sure.
You know it. It's
Yeah, yeah.
pretty popular. Steve Winwood gave that to me. That was a
Really?
gift. Yeah, it was a gift.
Oh man.
It's a fun story. I'll make it quick. We were
Do you
on the
know?
road doing another one of those double bills, and his guitar player, uh, who's an avid tennis player,
Uh-huh.
I think we were in Florida, in the South somewhere. It's hot, and like he was out there, regardless of the 100-degree heat,
Right, he's gonna play.
playing tennis for 2 or 3 hours. And
Right.
so he got heat stroke, and
Oh yeah, well,
he
that
missed a
can happen.
show.
Ooh.
He missed a show, and Steve was afraid that he might miss the next stage show too, because
Right,
we had
yeah.
another show the next day. And so that night, the night before the night he had gotten sick, um, I got a call in my hotel room with no guitar there. Would you be willing to, like, we'll send you some board tapes. Would you be willing to learn the show, so that in
Yeah.
case he's still sick the next day, you could sit in, and help us get through it. And I said, well, sure, I'll give it
Y-
a whirl. And so I didn't have a guitar, but they kept sending me board tapes, and the saxophone player in the band, Paul Booth, he was up all night writing charts for me, so I had the chords. And so I was up all night trying to learn this stuff, and just trying to do it in my head with no guitar.
Oh man,
But
Ark
I
of the
knew a lot of the
Diver.
tunes, and I'd been
Yeah.
listening to the band, so it was kind of a tall order. But I thought, okay, well, I'm not going to be able to play it like Jose can, but I can get through it. I think it'll help to have the guitar
Yeah.
there, you know.
Right. Yeah. Sure.
But I was thankfully he felt well enough the next day. So he looked kind of pale, and he was sitting down. But he made sound check and he made the gig. So, but anyway, as a token of Steve's appreciation, he knew I had my eye on this Kemper because they were both playing through those,
Right.
playing
Yeah.
guitar through those on that tour, and it was kind of new to me, and they were getting great sounds out of it. So I was really curious and intrigued, and so he said thanks for being willing to jump in, and as a token of my appreciation, I'd like to buy him a Kemper. So he did. A couple weeks later, I had one. So,
No,
and it's
that's.
pretty cool.
I mean, not.
It's ideal for the. I'll tell you, it's been ideal for my little home.
You're talking about not using the traditional jazz tone. I've had Robin Ford, I've had Mike Stern, I've had John Scofield, I've had Wayne Krantz, a
Yeah.
whole slew of people. Osnoy has got a quote that I absolutely love about this, and he says, "It's jazz, it just doesn't sound like it." and and so and talking with all of those guys and more, they got what I'm going to call the rock influenced players, the
Yeah.
Scott Hendersons and
Yeah.
people of that. I mean, that is absolutely jazz music. It's just it's not bebop. It's not hard bop. It's modern. And
Yeah.
you can't call it fusion because that's like,
Yeah, it has connotations
yeah,
that are,
connotations to it.
and also it feels sort of like a dated sort of
Yeah, it's
title of a
yeah.
certain genre of an era
Nobody,
as
yeah,
well.
nobody that plays that music likes to call it
No, no,
fusion.
probably not.
Because for that reason.
Well, that's why I think, at the risk of you know being redundant, Bill Evans's description of jazz as a process instead
Right,
of a genre or a style,
right.
is really right on the money. Because if you think of jazz as doing that, then the sound is kind of irrelevant. The sound is something that's a stylistic element of any one of these guys. They each play with a different sound, and they certainly sonically borrow from genres. But what they're doing, if they're improvising, is the same process of jazz. So if we think
I
of jazz as a process, it's a beautiful way to look at it, I think.
I interviewed
It's
Fareed Haq
liberating.
yesterday. Do you know Fareed? I
Yes.
interviewed Fareed
Yeah, I haven't talked to him in quite a number of
yesterday.
years,
What
but
a what a what a what a mind that guy has. He's an incredible guy. He really
yeah,
is. And he was saying that he's I don't know, I don't want to put words in his mouth, so just take this, but he's been disappointed with guitarists, because he feels the guitar hasn't progressed jazz along like piano players, like what Herbie did and what Chick
I think
did.
he's right,
Yeah,
actually.
me too. I totally agreed
Yeah.
with him, and that's why I'm bringing it up to you right now.
Yeah.
And he says, like what Herbie did and what Chick did and all of that was move the harmony, move everything along.
Right.
And guitar just kind of sat back there, back in 50, and even, it just didn't move along. And so the guys, he was talking about Pat Martino, specifically.
Mm-hmm.
He said Pat definitely had all the hard bop language and all that, but for some reason he moved his harmonies along. And if you listen to his original stuff, like Joyous Lake, and from there.
Yeah.
And so it's just interesting that there is a I don't want to say pent up demand, but there's a pent up feeling that guitar needs to catch up, with the more modern approach, if you will. That's a horrible language I'm using, but you get
No,
what I'm trying to say.
I think I get what you're trying to say, and I have some thoughts about it, and I do think that there there might be reasons that so many of the giants of jazz, as we think of them, the innovators,
Hmm.
were either pianists or saxophone players. I mean, they really seem to be like better represented than any of the other instruments at the top of the heap, if you think about
Absolutely.
it.
Absolutely.
And so I think that might not be a coincidence, but it might have something to do with the nature of the instruments that they're playing. Piano, of course, um, I don't think anybody would argue that it isn't set up in a way which lends itself more to sort of clarity in terms of the exploration of like, harmony and everything you can do with multiple notes than the guitar. I mean, compared to the guitar, which is visually more difficult to master, it's there are more limitations to how many notes you can play at a time. There are many more limitations about particular like close voicings that you can't get. You know,
Hmm.
you have to work around a lot of its limitations
Right.
that piano just doesn't have. Now, of course, guitar has things that are unique to it, and we guitarists like to celebrate those things. And I mean, I think the great players have done that. So there
Sure.
are giants in the world of guitar, but there are seldom guitarists who are giants in the world of harmony the way piano players in jazz have been, for instance. You know, so
Right.
that's I think that really has something to do with the instrument. And saxophone is just it's an instrument that like that it seems capable of just incredible facility. You know, um, it lends itself to the virtuoso thing. You know, and that's why there was Bird, and that's why uh, there was Train. You know, that would have been harder to do on a guitar. You know, it's
It
just
it it
and
fl-
guitars have typically been followed. I think the other thing is that bands, especially jazz bands, and guitar is an odd man out until rock and roll in the like mid '50s. You know, guitar was sort of an unusual instrument. It was a difficult instrument that composers didn't choose to write for unless they were guitar players. Typically,
right.
once in a while, but not all that much. It had it had a fringe presence in classical music and a sort of a separate. It also even in early American music, it was banjo and then guitar for rhythm, much only rhythm, and it wasn't until Charlie Christian kind of around that time when it became like because of the amplifier, really, it became like a soloist instrument in its own
Right.
right.
Do you
And
know?
of
I mean,
course, then
it's
it's following because already you've had like for decades and decades you've had jazz improvisers on horns
right.
and pianos, and guitar, but you haven't had them on guitar. I mean, there are players, but very few, and it's more of an accompaniment thing and less of a solo thing. So it's not a surprise that it wasn't at the forefront. I mean, how many jazz bands, especially after that, to have a guitarist in a jazz band was not a really common thing. Really,
No.
I mean, um, look at Miles's great, couple of quintets. There's no guitar player in those bands. Guitar was sort of extra.
And then he was the guy that really, because I we did a little series on the guitar players, Miles Davis guitar players.
Right.
That's how we happened to get Schofield and Stern and Ford and and so forth and so on. But he wanted Jimi Hendrix. It's what he
Yeah,
told the guys. He
I
said,
believe it.
I want Jimi Hendrix,
Right.
to play in this band. That's what I want. And
Right.
so he was. I mean, that guy was a whole different thing. The saxophone flows with a tone that is just you can't get out of the guitar unless you're playing loud.
Right. Well,
You
that's
know.
why I fell in love with an amplifier, I
Yeah.
think, more than I did a guitar. I mean,
Yeah.
like when I first started playing in high school, um, I had been a saxophone player as a kid, not a good one, but I had played for years. And I think my ear was drawn to the sound of a sustaining,
Yeah.
overdriven amplifier. That kind of guitar was what perked my ears up,
Sure.
not a clean jazz guitar. In fact, the first day I heard Led Zeppelin, the first record Led Zeppelin made,
Get that Kemper. Wind that Kemper up.
like, like
That's,
that one,
I love it.
The first day I heard that was the same day I heard like um, like Wes Montgomery, like let's, like,
Yeah.
like, like something like that. Like, it was one of those records, and my next door neighbor, was a good buddy of mine, his older brother had been shopping and had come home with a Wes Montgomery record and the first Led Zeppelin record. Well, it was clear to me which one I wanted to hear. It was only Led Zeppelin for me at the
Oh
time.
man, yeah,
But
sure.
of course, I mean, fast forward like 30 years. Well, not even 30 years, but even 15 years, and I was a huge Wes Montgomery fan. I mean, and I
Right.
always will be. He's at the top of the heap to me of jazz guitar.
I,
So,
I'm agreeing with you. He's my favorite of that genre as Wes. Yeah,
so
I think you know what your story is really in line with the stories of people like John Scofield and Mike Stern and I mean
yeah, I'm not surprised. Yeah,
they all say basically the same thing, and I don't want to put words in people's mouths, but they grew up playing rock and roll, and
of course.
that's the sensibilities that they are infused with. And what's really interesting is that it's like the ages of those guys. I mean, they're not kids, they're playing that,
No.
and then you got Larry Carlton, of course, who plays with an overdriven, he's playing with, it has been playing with overdriven tone forever and
Oh
ever
yeah.
and ever and
Yeah.
ever. I mean, these guys aren't, they're not kids yet.
No,
They're
no. I mean,
they,
well, that we were. I was born in the '50s, and the sounds of my youth, I mean, I was hooked from the Beatles even earlier, but especially, it's the turning point for a lot of guitar players.
oh,
It's
absolutely.
1964, the Beatles on Ed Sullivan. It's like after that, there's no going back.
There's no going back. Let's man, this is great. It really is great, but I didn't want to take up too much of your time, but I want to talk about what you're doing now. You're talking about a lot of solo guitar work, and
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a newly apt thing to do, in the last year, 'cause with all
because
this
you're home and
time
you're
at
alone.
home on my hands. So, yeah, I mean, when the pandemic, when lockdown first started over a year ago,
Hmm.
I sort of, I did, I, after the shock of the first couple of weeks, I guess, began to settle and wear off a little. I tried to sort of prioritize, like, okay, well, what's important for me to do here with this time? I'm not gonna be able to work. That was pretty clear. Um, so what do I want to do with all this time? Is there anything I want to do? And like, what might the most important things be? So I had a few things on the list, but one of them was to keep a duo project that had been interrupted by the pandemic. I was on a tour with Jim Beard. We're doing a duo tour in Ireland at the time, and we
Oh
had to
wow.
interrupt our trip and fly home, which was really a drag. Um, but because the music was we were enjoying playing, we were getting better at it, and we were having fun, and it was we had several more gigs to go. So
Hmm.
I decided that I wanted to make sure we kept that together as well as we could.
Right.
When we could get together, rehearse. I wanted to try to do that, and we have. We've been able, not consistently. There were some times when nobody was getting together, so we did. But in general, we've made an effort to sort of make sure that we keep our hand in on the material because it's a little difficult. We did a record. It's probably a couple of years ago that we put it out. Now it's called Chunks and Chair Knobs, the name of one of Jim's songs. Jim is the keyboard player in Steely Dan as well. So and he's an old buddy. I've known him for many years, and we never did a duo record together until this one. We've been playing with him for 40 years in various contexts on lots and lots of records, lots and lots of bands, but we never did a duo thing. So we finally got
Sure.
that together, and record came out well, and we were enjoying working it. So that was a priority, and I've kept that going. So we're hoping that very soon we'll be able to start booking that again. The other thing I wanted to do was to find a way to sort of keep my hand in on a lot of the original music that's more of a pop rock kind of style that I've
Sure.
done. I have 4 or 5 records of songs in that kind of style, and I wanted to make sure there was a way I could keep a little active that too. So that led to the creation of another duo project, which with the bass player in my band, a guy named Dennis Espantman, and he's the co-writer of most of the tunes that we've done in the last maybe 5, 6 years, and some even before that. So we actually put together some I kind of recorded tracks, like backing tracks, music minus bass and guitar and vocals, and we'll just
Right.
so we've been rehearsing with that. So it's a way we can actually probably do some gigs in smaller venues, maybe house concerts, and kind of keep a lid on the volume, but
Right.
still play with with like an electric guitar sound and an electric bass sound. So that was another priority, and that's been happening too, which is great. But the surprise, I think, the biggest surprise of the whole last year for me was I began to do a couple of monthly workshops. One was with a great guitarist named Alan Hines. Do you know Alan in
Yes. I
California?
mean,
Yeah, he's in
I
LA.
know. Yeah.
Yeah, he's become a buddy, and met him many years ago when I was on the road out there somehow, and he's a really great guitar player, super musical guy, and so we've been doing these monthly workshops, and that kind of gave me the idea that I could host a workshop of my own. Actually, my assistant gave me this idea that she kind of encouraged me to try to do this,
Mm-hmm.
and so because I've had this kind of side interest ever since I took my first jazz guitar lessons with the late great Harry Leahy, who's from Plainfield, New Jersey, fantastic guitar player and teacher. He had studied with Johnny Smith and
Mm.
and also with Dennis Sandoli, a famous Philadelphia teacher. So Harry introduced me to the style of like chord melody playing, on guitar. Just I don't know what to play, but the kind of where you actually play melodies
Sure.
of tunes, and harmonize them and get voice leading going and bass lines going and all that. Anyway, Harry did this so well that he taught me enough about the guitar so I could begin to do this, and so I started doing arrangements for him in my lessons. And I always had this idea that it would be cool to put a book out of solo guitar arrangements. So
Mm-hmm.
about 5, 6 years ago, I actually got that together, and I have two books that have been out for many years now. I sell them on my website, and you can probably find them on Amazon, places like that. But all of a sudden, with all this time alone, my interest was revived in the solo guitar thing, and I was convinced to try to do a workshop for interested people, because over the years, people have bought the books, and some people they had some questions about how to play some of the stuff in there, and they
Sure.
wanted to see me play it. So I said, okay, well, I'll try it and see what happens. Well, it's been going for probably 11, 12 months now. We've had like that many of these workshops, and we get about 25 people to attend each time. Basically, what the way I decided to approach them was to pick 3 tunes that I would agree to arrange for the next
Mm-hmm.
meeting, and ask people who are going to be participants to try to arrange one of them. And then when we would meet in the Zoom meeting, we would literally compare notes. I'd play mine and they'd play theirs, and we'd talk about process and how and choices you can make. And
Mm-hmm.
so just and it kind of very quickly evolved into just a celebration of that kind of style of guitar playing, which I thought for a while might be an endangered species, but clearly it's not. I'm pretty convinced that it's not. And pretty soon after we started, I started getting asking guests to come on, so that the participants would have a different point of view from my own, not just me, but other people too. So
Sure.
we've had some great guests, and that's been fun. So, but the real surprise was that because I was doing all these arrangements, I've got 2 new books of arrangements which are in the works, and one's ready to print, and the other one's close.
Mm-hmm.
And also, I decided somewhere about maybe January, I think the beginning of January, that because I was playing so many of these, that I ought to put a collection of my favorite arrangements that I think would sort of stand together on a record, and just make make a recording. So I bothered to release a CD of 18 of the solo arrangements that I've done. Most of them were done in the course of doing these workshops. So this was sort of a surprise little bonus of,
Well,
of being locked down. You know,
that's very cool.
the record's called Quiet
Yeah.
because it is. It's and very different from all the other records I've done because, you know, the other ones are pop rock records and electric guitar and vocals. This is all instrumental, all one sound on a jazz guitar, and just
Oh, so you used
standard jazz tunes.
You used an arch top?
Yeah, I did. Yeah. I tried this guitar, and this one's. I play this pretty much all the time. It is sort of. I can kind of go both ways with it, you know.
Right.
It's not ideal for the jazz thing. I found, and but I avoid playing the jazz guitar because I've had some injuries with my left arm and hand, and a lot of problems, and it's harder to play the jazz guitar. It's just it's a heavier setup, it's heavier strings, and slightly higher action, and that style, just playing chord melody, you're working all the time.
This one right here almost never gets played. It's absolutely a stunning instrument.
I mean, gorgeous.
It is, and it's made by Ryan Thorell. It's a full 17-inch traditional, you know, single pickup. It's you know, it's an amazing instrument, but I don't play it very much for all the reasons you.
Wow.
There's a Strat over there, and a thin line like yours. I have a Collings I-35, which is a 15-inch body like that.
That's great.
And I love that guitar. And then there's a Strat over there with nines. One's got nines, the other one's got tens on it.
Yeah, these have tens on them.
Yeah.
They're not really heavy strings on the jazz guitar. I have a Yamaha archtop guitar, and it's
just a whole different thing, though. The way
I mean, it's just for that music. I mean, I wasn't sure. I could do that on this guitar, but I record the same thing with both guitars, like the same song with both guitars. And listen, I said, and I ran it by my buddy Dennis. You know, he's my sort of trusted, my go-to sort of critic that way, and he said right away. He says, "Oh no, hands down, it's
there's
the jazz guitar sounds better for this."
Those guitars, and I've got one of those. I've got one. You know, the attack and the crest factor, rise time, and the decay.
Totally different.
It's totally different, and that affects the way that you phrase, and it affects the way the notes come out. And that music just lends itself to that more staccato, if you will, type of
I think so. And I think it's also just that our ears are so used to the sound of the tradition. You know, I mean, that's what happens. You know, like I mean,
that's
when you hear Johnny Smith play that, you know, he's got a Johnny Smith guitar of some sort. You know,
you want to cut your fingers off. Yeah,
it's a jazz guitar sound, and so because most of that is, I mean. Not everything is is a standard on that record or in these books. I have some more contemporary tunes in there too, some more pop tunes than jazz standards. But really, for me, when I fell in love with that sound and that approach, that style of arranging and playing guitar, it was really. It was a jazz guitar sort of sound, style. You know,
we hear a jazz guitar today. We embrace both kinds of music, country and Western. You know, we love the big fat archtop guitars, and we love the Strats and the Tellys and all of that with the overdrive. And I've got pedal, you know, the whole 9 yards. But it's because it's a different thing, but they're both good, you know.
Yeah, I mean, there's
Mexican food, there's Chinese food, there's Italian food, there's
it's just a wider palette, and why not you know, use all the colors you got. You know?
Absolutely. Well, listen, this has been incredible. It really has.
Thanks, Bob.
Thank you for doing this. It's great.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
Is there anything else that you want to add to this before we say goodbye?
No, I'm good. I'm just looking forward to getting out in the world and working again.
We're looking forward to hearing you.
It's been too long at home. I've gotten a chance recently to do like 3 little local gigs, and boy was it fun to just get in a big room and turn up an amp a little bit.
This was the 20-minute interview that's gone on for almost an hour.
Oh yeah, it's true. We'll have to. We'll
but that's
goodbye.
listen, that's, I've got, it's you, it's your gift to us, and we appreciate it. So
You're very
anyway,
welcome. I'm glad we could do this, Bob. It's
this,
nice.
Bob Bakert, Jazz Guitar Today, saying thanks to Jon Herington. Thank you
Great to
so
be here.
much, man.
All
It was
right.
really fun. Thank
All right,
you.
Bob.
And oh,
Yeah,
by the
great to
way,
talk
thank
to
you
you.
for being our first cover, because you
Oh,
took a
yeah.
flyer on us on that. I just said, hey man, would you do it? And you said, yeah, sure. And here we are, 3 years later,
Uh,
still
I'm
kicking
glad I
along.
could do it. I'm glad
Thanks,
I could
buddy.
have been there.
Bye bye now.
Bye.
See you,
Take
man.
care.